To, thank you. According to my watch, it's still a few minutes till 1 o'clock. So just continue talking because we told people on the live stream that we would start at 1. So I don't want to start too early for them. So you still have a few more minutes just to chat. And I'll let you know when it's time to start. Thank you. Okay, I think it's time we can get started. So welcome to everyone here. I'm glad to see you all made it to the sanctuary for our presentation. And thank you to those who are joining us live stream for our presentation in February here on Hearts Wide Open. It's an appropriate theme and speaker for this month about hearts and love and openness to others. I want to make sure that everyone got a copy of the PowerPoint that wants it. Otherwise, just raise your hand, and when I finish talking, I'll bring one to you. Our guest today is Cheryl Bremer, who is the elder for Stewardship. And when she approached me already several months ago about talking to this group, I said, by all means, because many of you have told me that the short times that you hear Cheryl or hear a report on the church budget is in the congregational meeting, and it's quick and you don't have enough paperwork behind it. But also because I think in talking with Cheryl and others, in our Matthew 25 initiative, one of the things under that is church vitality and the systems that we have for maintaining our congregation. And I think Westminster has a rich heritage of stewardship. A lot of people wondered if that would hold up during COVID, and I think Cheryl will tell you that it has. But then also stewardship in the future, and not only of our monetary or financial aspects, but also in terms of our talents and our time as well. So since most of you know Cheryl, I'll just let her have the microphone. And then at the end of the presentation, or even during, just raise your hand if you have questions. And John has agreed to be my runner for today, so he'll bring the microphone to you so we can all hear your questions. So without any more comment from me, Cheryl, I'll turn it over to you.
Well, hello again, everyone. Thank you, Dan, for turning me on just bingo like that. So a little bit more about me. I love hearing about people. I love people's stories. And sorry, I got my paperwork going here a second. My life of stewardship started way back when I was a young child. And my parents would put a quarter for each of us kids, on the counter every Sunday morning. And that's what we took to church. And they did that every week. And I can still see that table, and I can still see that quarter. And so they gave us that habit of stewardship. They also lived that stewardship because they became missionaries and they moved all of us to Nigeria, West Africa. And they lived the life of giving away, of imagining and having a vision for something larger than themselves. And so I wear this ring. This ring is my dad's wedding ring. And he gave it, they gave their stuff to us when they died, the little that they had. And my brothers didn't want the ring, and I said, I'll take the ring. And the ring underneath it is my grandfather's ring. And I had them fused together. And I wear it often to remind me of the heritage that I have in them. And I usually can't say that without getting all choked up. Still have that lump in my throat. It is a great heritage. And I think all of you would have, similar stories to that. And so we have a lot to be grateful for. So I went on, I graduated from college, I became a teacher, and then I decided, I love teaching. But I went back to school and got my accounting degree. I worked in public accounting. And then my alma mater tagged me to come and do stewardship at Calvin College, and that's where I met Tom. He was a great professor. Maybe you don't know that, but he was a great professor. Thank you. And so I say that Calvin twice educated me because they taught me how to be a teacher with a music minor, and then they taught me stewardship. And so when Westminster, knocked on my door and said, oh, we need an elder for stewardship, I had vowed when I retired I would never do that again. I was so tired. And, but it nagged on my heart. And so I said yes. And so even though it's not always an easy job, it is a very rewarding job. If any of you have ever worked on stewardship here at Westminster, you know that. And so it's always a challenge to think bigger than yourself, to be able to challenge people, to be stewardly, and know know that you're not asking for yourself, you are asking for the kingdom of heaven. So, there we go. So now let's talk about stewardship, past, present, and future. If you turn to the first slide here, so really what I want is for a couple of questions for you to think about. What do you want to learn from or take away from today's presentation? So I would really like this to be a conversation that we have together. And then what is your vision? Do you have a vision for what you think vital ministry at Westminster could be? And so then what are our opportunities and our barriers to that? How do you imagine stewardship fitting into us as a Matthew 25 congregation? And then what does it mean to have a culture of generosity? So those are the questions that I want you to think about, and we'll come back to them as we go through the presentation. So let's move to the next slide, and we can see these ladies. So I have the binders over there there's been history written of Westminster, and they're in these nice little spiral bounders, and I was looking through there for some information about what's gone on at Westminster in the past, and I gathered a couple of these little things. If you haven't read those books, oh, please pick them up, because they are just a wealth of information about this church's history. So interesting. So in 1863, the pastor was paid $850. And by the way, they couldn't really quite manage to come up with that. And so they had to borrow $550 in order to pay the pastor $850 in 1863. Pledges began in 1866 when they acquired the first property of the church. So that's the first record we have of people actually making pledges. In 1878, I love this one, Westminster's hard-working ladies raised $800 for a pipe organ. I just think that that's great way back when, but $800 back then was probably a lot of money. As much as the pastor made in a whole year. And then here's another one that I found very interesting. The Great Depression challenged members and the church. And fortunately, Jeanette Wiley's estate, so remember that word, Jeanette Wiley's estate kept the church viable. And then in 1973, many, many years later, the Memorial Trust Fund was actually established and the Building Fund. And we'll see how much that's grown. So, our history is replete with stories of ups and downs and struggles and triumphs. But it's the stories of the peoples whose visions are greater than themselves. Their vision is greater than themselves. And the people who trusted in God and they loved each other. And I think we do that well at Westminster. We can always do better, but I think we do that well here. And they love the community in which they serve. So that's just a little history. And is there anything else that anybody would like to add? Any little tidbits of information from way back when that you think would be an interesting piece of our history that have to do with finances or stewardship? Feel free to, raise your hand and John will come and give you the mic.
Bob Dildine.
First of all, I understand. Underneath this church are 2 steam locomotives that originally provided the heat and the power for the church. And they're still down there, what's left of them. And apparently they must have brought them up from the railroad yard down below Division Avenue here. Back in those days, there wasn't the buildings around, and they probably put logs underneath them and rolled them up here and put them in the basement as cheap, thrifty Scotch
Yeah.
Presbyterian means of getting heat.
Yeah, yeah, interesting. Very interesting. Wow.
I remember from the history of the Women's Association that the women raised the money to buy the lot, which is next door, which is the other side of the sanctuary, to build the education building. And the session didn't vote to do that, but the women decided to do it and went ahead and bought it. Mm-hmm. And that's why the building is the size it is.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Those Presbyterian women, tell you, watch out, right? Yeah, yeah. Okay, so, you know, we've heard the facts, we've probably read the facts. I have a question to ask Dan. Dan, where is the camera for the live stream? And do we know that if we have anybody on live stream? We do not. Is the camera right there? Just in case. They might take it in later.
The camera is on what you see right there, so I can change it to.
It doesn't matter. They don't need to see me. That's whatever is fine. I just didn't know if I had to look somewhere. So, okay, that's good. So, you know, one of the things that I read in the history and that I'm sure that we've all heard about is, you know, we're one of the largest churches in Michigan by size, by budget. We have one of the highest giving, you know, amounts and average giving, and we have lots of things to be proud of. We're one of the largest churches in the denomination. And I read through all of that and I thought, okay, that's all great. We have a great heritage. We have a lot to be proud of. But really, really, do comparisons matter? And then I started to think about what does matter. And for me, you know, it comes down to how are we as individuals and corporately as members responding to God's abundant grace in our lives. And I think when we feel that, when our hearts feel that and our hearts become wide open, is when we start to think about things that are greater than ourselves and how are we in and through us and the members extending the kingdom of God here on earth. And so it's nice to have those numbers, but it comes down to us and it comes down to our hearts, doesn't it? That's where it starts. So then I go back to the question, one of the questions that we had. Do any of you want to talk about, so when you think about Westminster, what is your vision? You know, what is your vision for what we can be? And what might some of our opportunities or maybe our barriers be that you think about? If anybody is willing to share that. Pat.
I guess it's pretty simplistic, but, I mean, how do we... It's pretty simple. I think I can yell on them. I don't know. Well, anyway, it's pretty simplistic, but how do we walk the talk? I mean, are we sort of walking around, or are we walking where Jesus is walking and saying, this is where we need to be going?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Great comment. And we'll never run out of ideas for that, will we? No, we just have to have eyes open and hearts open. Yeah. Mm-hmm. Any other ideas? Okay, let's, you can keep thinking about that. Let's go to the next slide. So, This slide shows us, and I don't know, maybe your handouts are a little better, but these are pledges that people have made and given. And then this little red thing here are members who give, but they prefer not to pledge. And then we have sort of other gifts. We have the green, which we see is WCDC, and then the food pantry, and Camp Henry is the light blue. We have some special offerings that we count. And then this is when we had the campaign in 2016. And so I think it's very interesting for us to be able to see how we respond. You know, that our general giving, if we say the blue and the red is, it jumped up a little bit here in 2018. 2019, we took a little hit. It was the beginning of COVID, and you can see what happened here. Camp Henry was hurting. COVID hit Camp Henry so hard. No campers, no income. And so what did our church do? They stepped up for Camp Henry. And you can see that, you know, our giving has stayed the same, but when Camp Henry needed it, we were there for them. And we have continued to be there for Camp Henry. You can see that in this year, the next year, in 2020, the food pantry was hurting. And so what did we do? We stepped up a little bit and we helped the food pantry. The other thing that I think is interesting to observe is from 2019, you can see this red bar is getting larger and larger. And what that means is more people they're still giving, but they're choosing not to pledge. And so while we are very happy that people are still giving, it does make it a little bit more difficult for the trustees and the church to plan a budget when we're not precisely sure what kind of income we're going to have year to year. So I will tell you that we come as close as we can, but we do live by faith as well. knowing we look at the past and we say, you know, look at our potential. We have a lot of potential. And so we look back a little bit and we say, yeah, we're not quite sure about this number. This is a number that we plug every year when we do the budget. But the past tells us, the past informs us that we'll be okay. Any questions about that? Yeah, Jen.
One comment. I see on. No problem. I see the year in 2020, the pink on the top, and so just comment. I think that special offering was pretty amazing. Was people from the congregation who were receiving the government money.
Yes.
Kickback and choose to say, let's pool that and give that back into our community to the places and people who need it, because our finances have stayed level and we haven't been hit by COVID. So that pink there is really a wild, lovely offering that many were able and inspired to do.
Yeah, thank you for that. Great comment. Great memory, Jen. Yeah. Other comments? Questions? Linda? This is, the light blue is Mission Matters. Yeah, yeah, yeah. And so, you know, I am fairly sure that if we were to do a significant drive again someday, that, you know, the numbers would still be there. Now, I will tell you that, and you've probably heard me say it before, that in the past, this church has had some fairly wealthy, significant donors. I think we see part of that in Mission Matters. And some of those lovely souls are, now in glory. And some of them have left some money in their estate, which gets counted in a different category. But it's now more up to us. I mean, I think I can say to this group that at one time in the past, maybe our largest gift in any one year might have been $100,000. Today, conglomerate to all of our all of our funds, our core missions, maybe one, maybe two that are at the $75,000 level, but most are less than that now. And so while the average gift has gone up in our congregation from 2,700 the previous year to last year, 3,400, it's a significant increase. So I think that there is a groundswell of people that are saying, we're going to step up, and we really believe in this church. We believe in the mission. We believe in the viability of this church, and we're giving, from our hearts. So, yeah, Tom.
Sure. Can I make a clarification on behalf of Camp Henry from your autograph? You implied that Camp Henry was supported by church during 2019, that Camp Henry remained open. That broader bar for Camp Henry giving in 2019 reflects the end of the Thrive campaign, where generous donors were donating to camp. So, and camp has remained open all those COVID years. It was just in a reduced fashion. So camp was still self-sustaining revenue-wise, just so that people are aware of that. It's not like Westminster was having to support and
we
keep
did for 1 year, Tom. I will correct you on that.
Oh.
The church did support Camp Henry for 1 year, but this is not. These gifts are gifts, individual gifts. This is not church giving.
Okay.
These are individuals.
Yes.
That have.
I'm aware of that.
Yeah.
And your statement made it sound like church.
Okay.
This reflects the church was giving a whole lot more to Camp Henry in that broader light blue band.
Oh, thank you for that.
And
yeah. The people.
And in general, camp has supported itself.
Yeah.
So just so people are clear, it's been a decade since church had to substantially support Camp Henry.
Correct. Yeah.
The blue bar about pledges has steadily declined.
Mm-hmm.
And I know how rough that is budget-wise then to plan.
Mm-hmm.
Do you have any idea why it has declined?
Well, I think, Tom, that I like to look at the blue and the red together, because these are pledges, but these are also very faithful givers that, for whatever reason, are not wanting to pledge. So if, this was a pretty large number. This was COVID, and this was trouble in the church, to be very honest with you. We lost some members. We lost some significant donors, givers right here. But if we look at the blue and the red, I think that we're growing steadily again, but the pledges are not. People are giving, but they're not pledging. And part of that is still we're in the healing process in the church, and so there's a little uncertainty. And so I've talked with a few members who say, I don't know, I'm a little shaky, I don't know if we're going to stay, and so I don't want to pledge, but then they give. Yeah. So that's what's going on there, in all transparency. Yeah. So. Yeah, Betty.
Are there changes in the numbers of members that have affected the fluctuation here?
Well, I think, as you can, the next slide will show actually, we had what we always said we had 1,300 members for years and years and years. And so if the history shows that about 70% of our members made a gift in any one year, then all of a sudden now we're at 1,100 members and still about 70%. So less members are giving more. So, does that help? Yeah. We good? Next slide. Oh, this shows the number of givers. So here we are. I jumped ahead on my one slide here. I think this is just interesting. And I will say that the reason I didn't go back any further than 2016 is because in those years just before that, I would say 5 to 10 years before that, is when we changed around a lot of things as far as budgeting. And WCDC and our core ministries are recorded separately, whereas they used to be recorded as part of our total giving. And so this reflects the number of givers to our general operations. So you can see, it's anywhere in the 400. We dipped down a little bit. You can see that during COVID. But look at this. We're really, that's 21. We're really coming back up in a good trajectory there. So, and I think you've heard me say our new members are tremendous. I mean, 100% of them made a pledge last year. So that's a great example for all of us, really. Yeah. So that's just a little tidbit of information there. So when I think about way back in the history, when they paid the pastor $850 and, they had the real bumps along the road, to where we are now, and these are our net assets if we add up. Our general, the church in general, WPC, Memorial Trust is managing almost $4 million right now. Camp Henry's net assets, WCDC, the food pantry, now Camp Henry and the church, of course, a lot of their assets are in real estate. But when you look at the total of who we are, and that we are now at $13+ million of net assets, that is a huge heritage and a huge responsibility for us as church members. So we have so much to be grateful for, and every reason to be excited about the viability of this church in the future. Questions about that, or can anybody add any history to that? Tom?
An English major question of an accountant, okay? I really don't, does that mean we have that much in the pot?
No. It doesn't mean we have that much in the bank. We
Right.
have that much in real estate, and we have that much in that we're managing, like the Memorial Trust, actually. I mean, we have that much in investment in Memorial Trust.
That's quite impressive.
It is very impressive, right? Mm-hmm. Now, I mean, a large part of our operation is in the value of this real estate right here. Yeah. Mm-hmm. Yeah. And Camp Henry as well. Yeah, Tom. You were going to know Tom was going to have his hand up. Yeah. 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 So, okay. Where are we on our next slide here? I've sort of lost. Okay, let's talk about that. So, John, the Memorial Trust has put together, and if you have read through the 2022 annual report, you can see this report in there as well. I lost my slides here. Where are my slides? So I mentioned earlier that the first estate gift from Jeanette Wiley that sustained the church is still giving after all of these years. And it's giving at the rate of just over $3,000 each year in support of the general fund. It's just a wonderful story that the estate gift just keeps giving and giving and giving. And I must say, it's not a huge estate, but it has just slowly grown, and it's still giving back, and it's giving to help the general fund. So then in '73, the Memorial Trust Fund was actually established, and now if you read through the document that John just handed out, you can see it's very interesting. The Memorial Trust Fund Committee is managing 10 endowment funds that benefit Westminster and our core ministries. And you've heard us talk about the Kramer Fund. That one is a significant endowment fund that is managed by the Grand Rapids Foundation, but we are one of 3 beneficiaries of that fund that provides significant revenue for us every year for some programs. And so altogether, in 2022, there was over $200,000 from those endowment funds that helped us in our budget. That is very, very significant. And I don't know, you wonder where would we be without any endowment? Yeah. If you have, and I will say, if you have questions and want to know more about the Memorial Trust Fund, you can see this on the next slide, Dan. You can talk to Lynette, and what the Memorial Trust Fund has decided is that the leadership of Memorial Trust turns over, every 2-3 years it turns over, and so they are asking that if you want to talk about that, if you have an idea, if you know what your estate plans are already, if you don't, but you wonder and you think, oh, I'd like to leave some of my estate to Westminster, I just don't know how or what, or how should I, what should I do about that? Then mention that to Lynette. I will be happy to talk to you as well. Much of my career was spent in plan giving, and we would be happy to talk to you about that. But I will say that for any of you who are thinking, or any of you who already have it in your estate, I can't emphasize this enough. The most helpful gift is the unrestricted gift. And the reason for that is the church changes, our programs change. We may have one position for a few years, and then we don't have that position anymore. And if your gift is tagged for a certain position or a certain program, it ties the church's hands, to put it bluntly. So the best, the most helpful gift you can think about in your estate plans is the unrestricted gift. And so, we know the legacy. We've seen it. You see it on paper, $13 million some dollars, and you know that over 200 is coming into the general fund every year. So the impact is on the future viability for our church. And the other thing is, as an example to your children and your family. And I will never forget when I was working in fundraising, and we were doing a campaign, and we were talking to donors, and they were like, I don't want my name anywhere. I don't want anybody to know that I did this. And we're like, okay, let's talk about that. And some of them stayed that way. Some of them stayed anonymous. But many of them changed their minds when we talked about what legacy do you want to leave for your children? What example do you want to leave for your children? When your children walk out on a deck, or when they walk into an auditorium and they see Grandpa's name on the back of the chair, or they see Grandpa's name on a building, or they see Grandma's, thing in the music department, it just tugs at your heart. And so you are leaving them with a reminder about how important you think stewardship is, and how important you think giving back is. And it has a significant impact on your children and your grandchildren. So just think about that as well.
Cheryl, this is a wonderful document that helps take mystery out of the different funds, and also will help Pat and I decide on our directed giving. And it looks to me like Memorial Trust Fund and Westminster Endowment Trust are the two largest unrestricted
Yes.
funds. Is that correct?
Yeah, I mean, I'll say that, but I'm not looking at the document, and I'm not on Memorial Trust, but I think that would be right, Tom. Yeah.
Thank you. The clarification and helping to cut through the mystery.
Yeah, yeah. Information is a good tool, So then I think if we go to the next slide, let's talk a little bit about Westminster going forward. And I think Kieran has done a nice job of talking about how stewardship fits into us as a Matthew 25 congregation. I would be interested to hear your thoughts on that. But certainly, building congregational vitality, one of the 7 indicators of that vitality is that we have healthy systems, and part of that is being fiscally responsible, and accountability and transparency, I would add to that as well. So, and another mark of a Matthew 25 congregation is cultivating that spirit of generosity. And so what does that mean? Well, we've talked about, regular, committed, habitual giving, the quarter on the, whatever that may be. It's that weekly. And so you will see in the pews, actually, because more and more of our people are giving online as well, or they're giving one time a year from their IRAs and their QCDs, and it's all been wonderful, but it isn't that every week I put my dollars in the plate when the offering comes by. And so if you look on the back of, in your pew somewhere here, you will see that Stewardship Committee made these little things. And if you feel like, what do I do when that plate passes me by every week and I just sort of pass it on and I do nothing? These have been in the pews for a while, but I take one of these because, I'll be honest with you, we give from our IRAs once a year, right? So I take one of these every week, and when the plate comes by, I'm like, Dad, I'm still giving. The plate goes by, I'm just putting it in. And then, it's your way of saying, this is habitual for me. This is top of mind for me. So
I think it would be a good idea to mention that sometimes.
That's a great comment, Betty. I'm going to write that down. Okay. I'm going to keep this to remind me. Yeah. So that regular habitual committed giving. And then there's sort of a communal action as well. We practice generous giving together. We're part of the Sandwich Brigade or the Food Pantry or Together West Michigan or Cuba, Benton Harbor, whatever it is that we commit to something larger than ourselves to doing together. That's cultivating the spirit of generosity, sort of in a communal way. And then, of course, it's encouraging each other to include Westminster in our legacy giving as well. So, other ideas? Comments? Linda.
I'm sort of aware that there are funds in the Memorial Trust and the Endowment Trust that aren't mentioned. I know one year, maybe it was before COVID, when Dave Driscoll was the elder for stewardship, that he listed all those, the small ones that different people had given, in addition to these big ones.
Really?
I mean, how, well.
And that,
like
and that are being managed by Memorial Trust?
Yes. Yeah. That was one of the first times I had ever seen that, and it was really interesting that there were other names, of people who had given smaller amounts, but they were still earning the interest, and
I'm going to ask that question. Thank you.
yeah.
Were those maybe ones that are part of the... Were those ones that are maybe part of the Memorial Trust Fund or the Endowment Fund maybe? And maybe names of some recent donations that went into that?
Included in the pot? Could be.
But we don't see that very often. And that's like, to us, people that, longtime members, they left money.
Yeah,
there you
yeah.
go.
Great idea. Thank you, Linda, for that. So I think, the final thing that I want us to think about is where your treasure is, and that's our final slide, but from Matthew 6:21, where your treasure is, there will your heart be also. And, or you can say it this way, where we put our treasure is where our heart will end up. So for me, it comes back to a matter of the heart. A heart of gratitude leads to a heart of giving, leads to a heart of, thinking of someone other than ourselves, first of all, leads to my challenging my own heart to say, what are you? What are you doing with the abundance that you have been blessed with? Do you really need that more than somebody else? What can the church do with some of your abundance? And so I think we never get old enough, do we, Betty? That we don't always say, God, help me to be responsible. Help me to think of others before I think of myself. And so it's a lifelong call and opportunity for us, I think, as people of God. So, I don't know where we are here. Right on time, okay. Any more questions?
May I share a success story?
You may. I love those.
I love your challenge and invitation to giving, Cheryl. And at our Camp Henry board retreat this last weekend, Sonia Fryer, who is on on the Camp Henry board shared with me that her accomplished son, Nathaniel, who is in seminary and is on the verge of finishing seminary, he was one of the scholarship recipients from the Mary DeYoung Subtrust Scholarship Fund. But wouldn't hurt us to celebrate some of those successes that have come from the generosity of our congregation, and that also can be inspirational to others giving.
And do you have any suggestions, Tom, for an effective way to share that information?
Just use our best working with communications folks here in church and putting it into all of our vehicles. It could be just, it could be a little paragraph, a little minute for stewardship success, that we celebrate that.
I'm thinking of Nathaniel, and it would be great to have it when he's back here sometime for him to,
Sure.
perhaps before the
But that's
offering
a
or something.
logistics thing, but we could
Right.
start right now with putting a little blurb in each of our weekly communications that come out in many different forms and say, FYI, here's something that your generosity benefited someone or something or
Yeah.
some organization from church.
Yeah,
Just like all the Camp Henry scholarships
Right.
that have become possible for those who couldn't afford to go to camp.
right. Great idea. Yeah. There's,
I remember Kyle Nolan received
yeah,
from that same fund too.
right.
And at the time when it was announced, I was sitting next to Kyle, and I remember Mary DeYoung, that she was very elderly when we were young and joined the church. And
Oh.
I just thought how happy she would be that that money was being used for Kyle. In the same way with Nathaniel, it's just, and
Lots of stories.
if that could be sub, A and B under that heading. People don't know those stories unless they just happen to be somewhere.
Yeah. Yeah. Great idea. Thank you. Go ahead.
Well,
I'm
thank
just
you
gonna-
so much, Cheryl.
Yeah, you're
for
welcome.
sharing with us. This has been wonderful. Lots of excellent information, and you will notice that on the list of funds is the Minnie Beale Fund. I think now it's actually the Irene and Minnie Beale Fund, and that supports all of our activities. That's why you can come to lunch today and not have to pay anything or go on one of our bus trips for $10. Believe me, they cost a lot more than that. So we benefit from those funds and those gifts as well. And in line with that, with our programs, I just wanted to highlight something that I may have put in an email and you may or may not have gotten. But next month in March, we are having some music ensembles from one of our neighbors, Catholic Central High School, that will be our presentation, or our program for March here in the Sanctuary at 1. But the kids from the high school are going to be joining us for lunch as well. And there are about 30 of them. So I hope we get as many of us as them and we can have some conversation at lunch. I'm really excited about that. And then in April, we are having some representatives from the zoo, and they will bring some of their kids along with them. So I don't know what assortment of animals they will be bringing, but we will have, it's called Zoo to You, and they'll be bringing a program with some live critters for us to enjoy. And then in May, we're taking a bus trip, so we have a full spring schedule we hope you will enjoy. Another point of business, we always recognize birthdays. Now, the only birthday I could find in February was Tom. Is there anybody else with a February birthday here today? Okay, well, let's sing happy birthday to Tom then. Oh, yeah. Yeah, we could do January. Yeah. And your first name again, Linda? Your first, Betty. Betty, I'm sorry. We've only been here a few years, so I don't know everybody yet. So we'll sing happy birthday to Betty and to Tom. Are you ready? Happy birthday to you. Happy birthday to you. Happy birthday, dear Betty and Tom. Happy birthday to you. and many more. Then in closing, again, you know, my mind does squirrels, and I'm sure maybe chases squirrels, and I'm sure some of you have that problem too. I came up with I know Martin Luther King had a poem or a speech called I Have a Dream. And about the same time that he wrote that, Langston Hughes also wrote a poem called I Dream a World. And when I looked down at my notes, I also thought of the movie Tangled and this motley crew in the bar. I don't know if you know the scene. Tangled is the Disney cartoon version of Rapunzel. Has anybody seen that? Other than, yeah. Well, your grandkids must be the right or wrong ages that you haven't seen it. But Rapunzel escapes from her tower, and she goes into this bar with this motley crew of men, in particular, who you wouldn't imagine in the world would have a dream. And they break into this song about what all their dreams are, from the guy who's beating people up to the one who's, you know, anyway, they're just a motley crew. So even motley crews have dreams. And if you haven't seen that, go home and find Tangled on your TV and watch it, because it's a wonderful song about what it means to have a dream. So whatever, and today Cheryl has presented us with a wonderful dream of what Westminster can still be and will be in the future. So as I read this poem from Langston Hughes, and in case you don't know about Langston, Langston was an American poet, social activist, novelist, playwright, and columnist from Joplin, Missouri. One of the earliest innovators of the literary art form called jazz poetry, Hughes is best known as the leader of the Harlem Renaissance. And like Martin Luther King Jr., Langston also had a dream. So as I read his poem about I Dream a World, would you close your eyes and just listen and dream about what you think our world could still be? So this is I Dream a World from Langston Hughes. I dream a world where man no other man will scorn, where love will bless the earth and peace its paths adorn. I dream a world where all will know sweet freedom's way, where greed no longer saps the soul, nor avarice blights our day. I dream a world where black or white, whatever race you be, will share the bounties of the earth, and every man is free, where wretchedness will hang its head like joy, and joy like a pearl attends the needs of all mankind. Of such I dream my world, and I would say of such we dream our world. Thank you for coming today, and we'll see you all in March.